Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only No BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Joining me today to share the 10 books that had a major impact on his life journey is astrologer, energy coach, spiritual guide and healer, Patrick Geary, who worked as a lawyer for 15 years before surprising himself with a new career, writing weekly cosmic updates and running regular workshops, retreats and study groups to help people from all walks of life find their truth in our ever-expanding universe, and also teaching how we can all work with time and space to create more joyful experiences of life. Patrick Geary, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
So you always had a very unique relationship with books. Tell us about that.
I did. So it was only recently that I uncovered the natal origins of my relationship with books. I have always loved being around books. My office is filled with books. I have stacks of books in my bedroom. I love the energy that they give. I love the covers. I love the way they feel in my hands. And I don't often read them. So for many years, I wondered, what am I doing with all of these books? And I almost felt this weight or this heaviness, this sense of, oh, like I look at my shelf and feel like I haven't read you yet, and I haven't read you, and I haven't read you. And there's so much joy, and there's so much information, and so much wisdom, and it's all coming towards me. But when am I going to find the time, and how am I going to do it? And then my mom told me when she was visiting, it was a few months ago, that when I was a baby, she would always put a book in my crib at night before she went to sleep and I went to sleep or went wherever babies go. And it suddenly made sense to me. It was just this feeling of, I am reading these books. It's like I'm absorbing them through osmosis, just being with their presence. And once I gave myself permission to be with books in that way, it's like it all just clicked into place. Like these books are just showing up in my life. I pick up a book, I bring it into my home, and then whatever the wisdom is, it finds me through my real life situations that just emerge. And then I start connecting with other people who are reading the book, or I see strangers who are reading the book, or I meet someone who is editing the book, as was the case with you. It's just so amazing, the synchronicities that are possible. So I almost feel like books read themselves through me.
We'll have, there is a synchronicity in your list, and we'll share that with our audience a little bit later. But, I remember when I was expecting my first child, my son, I was reading Lord of the Rings, and I loved it so much that I used to read it aloud, hoping that somehow, he would listen to it in utero and he would develop a love, for the book too. It took a long while. It took a very long while because he really did not like reading as a child. But later on, he started reading fantasy books. So maybe it worked, maybe it didn't.
It all goes in there. So I have every confidence that it had an impact.
I think it does. And I think the intention is often enough.
It is, especially when that intention is met with love. And what's more powerful for a baby than a mother's love? So to offer something that you love so much to your child, of course, the universe is just going to say yes to this.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about the first book on your list, which is the Enneagram, Understanding Yourself and the Others in Your Life. This was written by Helen Palmer, who I think is considered a world expert on the Enneagram, and it was published in 1998.
Yeah, what a fantastic book. And this is a book that found me through my fairy godmother in California, who had been around the Enneagram, I guess, since its reemergence into consciousness, so much of which seemed to happen in the Bay Area. And it came into my life at a time in my teenage years where I really wasn't sure what I was all about and who I was. And perhaps like many teenagers, I just felt really misunderstood, especially when it came to my role in my family, which was shifting as I was growing up. So I discovered it not alone, but in the context of my family. And again, with that sort of loving maternal imprint. So it was something that was easy for my family to accept and for us to all get to know each other better, to recognize at first, to recognize what are the archetypes and how do we embody them. And then as I've worked with the Enneagram and gotten to know it over the years, really to appreciate how dynamic it is. That while it's easy to look at this as like there are just these clear 9 points, it's really just about the pathways that we all have to move through life, and that deeper sense of, well, this is where I am and this is where you are and this is where we meet and this is how we come together. So it's almost like in those early days it helped me give myself a container that I could define myself in, and now it's helped me remove all the containers that I used to define myself by or to define other people by. So it's just such a fantastic book, and it really goes into tremendous depth.
I've tried to understand the Enneagram. I've read several books. I thought I knew what my number was. I have heard that it can actually change during your lifetime, but I never feel that I've completely grasped it and know what to do with it. But reading your description, and it's a much fuller description than we have time for now, so people can go to the website and read that. It made me buy the book. And so now I'm going to commit to diving in and seeing if I can master this one. Do you use the Enneagram when you're doing astrological readings for people?
I have played around with it. I'll be aware of those archetypes and how they overlap with where people find themselves, I guess, with that cosmic imprint. It's interesting. I don't know that I've consciously brought it to light with clients, partly because it can feel like, well, this is a whole new system to introduce. So maybe this is also an invitation for me to do that, to seek out people who are aware of the Enneagram and who use it, and then to add that on. Because I feel like when you get that resonance between these different systems, because we're all talking about the same thing, it's just another portal in to break things up into these 9 pathways. And
Yes.
as you say, there's something mystical about it. Maybe there's a joy in something being unknowable that you try to pin yourself down and then you move, which is a little bit how I feel about astrology in some way. You could spend your whole life looking at one chart and you're never going to know everything there is to know about it. You just know enough
Mm.
to help you move through whatever it is you're moving through. So the Enneagram I tend to view in a similar way. So I'd also celebrate that sense of, well, hey, isn't it nice that we can have that feeling of like, there's just this tremendous mystery in this and we get to know it. And then
Yes.
as soon as we think we know it, boom, there's more.
Yeah. So let's move on to book 2, which is Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One, by Jenny Blake, which was published relatively recently in 2016.
Yeah, I absolutely love this book. And it's funny because when I was thinking about what counts as a spiritual book, and I think the answer is everything counts as a spiritual book. It's just how are we relating to it? And this book is a book that you
Yeah.
would see. I know, I think Jenny did actually pay for it to be at some point at bookstores in the airport as kind of like one of those wonderful self-help books that you might grab on your way to, particularly probably to a business trip, and thinking, maybe it's time for a change.
Mm,
Maybe I'd like to
yeah.
imagine what might come next. Is it a promotion? Is it a lateral move? Is it changing industries? So what I really love about this book is that it is so beautifully accessible, that Jenny really speaks from the heart, and it is really ultimately about getting to know yourself and who you are as you change. And career is one of those ways that maybe we accept a little bit more, at least in certain circles, that we accept that this is an area where we experience tumultuous times. and where we're not sure what we want to do. And it's okay to ask for advice. Like, it's okay to have a career counselor. It's okay to have someone look at your resume, maybe in ways it's not so comfortable when you think about marriage or you think about mental health or you think about sex, God forbid, all these other areas of our lives where things can show up. But career is one of those ones where, like, I'll often notice with a client, they might come in and say, I'm thinking about changing career. And then as soon as I look below that pattern or that statement to see what's present, all of a sudden I realize, wait a second, is this really about career? Or is this about how you're feeling in your relationship? Or is this about what's happening at home? Or is this about your health? So it's like so many of these things manifest through career, which I welcome because it gives them a way to show up. So this book, what I think it does so brilliantly is it takes that self-help career imprint and it brings you consciously much deeper into that sense of, well, who am I really? And career change is just change. So when you get better at career change, you get better at change.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting book, especially for those that find it really hard to make decisions. Librans in particular, I found, it would be a great book. I mean, my granddaughter, she's 16 and she really finds it hard to make a decision. So that's one that I'll put on her reading list.
Yeah, and Jenny's a Libra, the author. So how fantastic is it that you've picked up on that too?
Wow. Isn't it, always the way you teach what you know?
Absolutely, you nailed it.
Yeah. So book 3 is a perennial bestseller, The Nature of Personality Reality. Specific practical techniques for solving everyday problems and enriching the life you know. And this is a Seth book, in case anyone's not aware of that, by Jane Roberts, and it was published in 1974. When did you come across this book and how?
Oh my gosh. So I first came across Seth. It was, gosh, this was right as I was leaving my career with UNICEF. I went to Sicily with a very good friend, and she came with one of her friends. They had come all the way from New Zealand and they were going on a tour of volcanoes. How cool is that? They both work in geology. So Seth just emerged as part of some broader conversations around my life, around change. At the time, I was going through a process of surrogacy to welcome my children into the world. There was much upheaval that was going on and happening. It was almost like I was breaking down all of these ideas of who I was and these structures that I had based myself on. And that can be a little unnerving at times, like deconstructing my reality or deconstructing my sense of who I was and not really knowing how to build something. So, this friend of a friend who became a very good friend and a guide along the way introduced me to Seth. And what she said to me is, listen, you're really smart. You're going to love this book. This book will speak to your intellect about how you can create a new sense of what your life is all about. You're going to be able to build these clear structures. You can change what your beliefs are. You can change how you see the world. It really puts you in the driver's seat. So it came to me very much through this lens of, going through that period of deep deconstruction in my life, and then knowing that there was a way that things worked. I just didn't know what it was yet. So it was so magical that it found me. And it also found me in the perfect way. I listened to it. And listening to it is spectacular because it's like a play. You hear the author, Jane, you hear her husband, Robert, you hear their interaction, you hear Seth coming in, you hear what it's like for her to channel. So it wasn't just the messages that Seth gave. It was also the experience of Jane, of the author, of the channel, the experience of her husband as the observer, and who's this friend of, I guess, who's the friend of Seth. And Jane doesn't witness the interactions between Robert and Seth. So it was this really interesting kind of triangulation. So also just the way it was put together was just so fundamentally entertaining.
So that was very forward thinking. If they recorded that book, probably long before Audible was available, and people weren't recording books so much back then.
Oh, well, I wonder, it might be, I think they might have actors who recorded the version I listened to. And also, they did record all their
Ah,
sessions. So I
did
know
they?
you can get
Okay.
access to Some of those
Okay.
sessions, funnily enough, the Seth archive is at my law school alma mater. It's at Yale. And had I known this when I was there, I would have loved to go and to see all of the materials. I'm not sure how they ended up there, but isn't that fantastic?
Well, why would they be there?
Who
That's a
knows?
mystery for
I
you.
guess it's what Seth wanted, and it certainly speaks to that sense that my friend expressed, that it's very intellectual material. Because oftentimes with spiritual material, we get that message of it's all about the heart, and yes, it is about living our lives through the heart. And also, we have these minds, we have these brains, and they're brilliant. Almost has this crystalline quality to it. So it makes a lot of sense that Seth would find its way or his way to Yale, which is such a temple to the mind and also a place that's very personally resonant for me.
Mm, wow. Well, book number 4 is by an author that we both appreciate very much. The book is Transparency, Seeing Through to Our Expanded Human Capacity, and the author is Penny Pierce, and the book was published in 2017.
Oh, I absolutely love Penny. She is such a gem. She's so brilliant and she's so funny. And I also heard her talking about another one of her books, Frequency, which has just been republished the other day. And she said that she'll
Mm,
sometimes go through them and just flip to a page and look at it and just wonder, huh, I wrote that. Just kind of like looking at the words that came through her with that new, fresh eye. And I really feel that whenever I read any of her books, and that includes Transparency. It's just like the way that I consume her material, it's much more through bibliomancy. There's so much that's there. So just being able to flip to a page and wonder, well, what's the message from Penny today? And that book in particular, it's so interesting. I wonder what the expression ahead of its time means. Because in some sense, how can anything really ever be ahead of its time? Because if it's here, then it's here now, and the only thing that exists is now, so it must be perfectly on time. And also, it has this like oracular quality to it, and how she wrote about something a number of years ago that we're all really just starting to experience in our lives and in our bodies now. This huge release of karma. My own life, I had just been forgetting things left, right, and center. These old memories that I just have no reason to hold on to, things that hold any kind of density. It's just dissolving. I've been forgetting entire emotions. A few days ago, I forgot the emotion of overwhelm. It was this sudden awareness of, well, how could I ever be overwhelmed? I always have the time to do whatever needs to be done. So either what I'm looking at doesn't need to be done, or I have the time. So it's that experience that Penny talked about in Transparency, which is just
mm,
becoming so much more clear. And it doesn't mean that I don't move through my life without snags. It's just more the sense of, as I become more clear, I'm able to identify what those are and to bring them back into balance and harmony. And this book so clearly and beautifully lays out that process. And as Penny always does with her books, she has so many fun meditations and exercises and things that you can do to really just play. There's that sort of lightheartedness. Remember, she once said that she finds that self entertainment is a very high vibrational value. And I completely agree. And I find this comes across so brilliantly in her books, that it's really wonderful. And I guess it's very like nutritional information. It's like it's rich in that sense. Like it's like a cheesecake. I
that's a
wouldn't pick
good
up a
word.
cheesecake and eat the whole thing. I just pick up a little bit. And also, it's light and fluffy.
Yeah. It's absolutely true what you say about, something ahead of its time and in its time. I'm actually rereading Frequency now. I am reading the 15th anniversary edition because I'm interviewing Penny shortly. And I read the first edition in 2009, and it struck me so, so deeply. It became an instant favorite of mine that I've recommended to many people. Reading it again, you know, I always tend to think, well, what can you possibly add? That would make that book any better. But then, of course, we're in a completely different time, and all of the things that she talked about then are happening. They're in our lives daily, and it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'm a different person. So much has changed. To issue a 15th anniversary edition, yeah, I can see the wisdom in that.
Oh, it's so brilliant. I completely agree. And the book that you read today and the book that you read tomorrow, even if it's ostensibly the same book, you've changed. And books can change too.
Yes,
Which I know one of the other books we'll talk
yes,
about later, Quantum Leaps, Cynthia Sue Larson, she's talked about books that she's picked up that have changed, where chapters have
yes,
appeared or references have appeared, that these books update
yes,
themselves as we also move forward.
yes.
So even that sense of this is very literally like we know that Penny's gone through and updated the book. Books can do this by themselves too. How fascinating is that?
Yeah. Yes, that makes me think about lexigramming. Lexigramming is a bit like anagrams, but you take people's names and you create loads of words out of them, and it turns out to be quite prophetic in many instances. And I remember reading in one of Linda Goodman's books about the angels, the fairies, the divas that exist with every single word. Yeah, and each word, each letter has its own. And, I used to play with that thought quite a lot. You can almost see them moving words around and, oh, let's put some new words into this book. Let's take some words out because, yeah, that one's done with or whatever. I think that's a lovely thought to think of books as alive, having their own helpers, to bring them up to date or do whatever they need as they grow too.
Oh, that is magical. I'm absolutely setting that intention for everything I write from now on. And it does go back to that ancient understanding where runes are letters with meaning. And that's where our letters come
Yes,
from.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So, moving on to book 5, Past Lives, Present Dreams, How to Use Reincarnation for Personal Growth by Denise Lynn. And it's now called Past Lives, Present Miracles. The original was published in 1994. You were originally attracted to this book by its cover, weren't you?
I sure was. I mean, of all books that have found me, this is the one that really, very literally jumped out at me. I was walking my kids down to daycare, which is maybe a 15-minute walk away from my house. It was a misty, wintry morning. It was raining, and someone had put a bunch of books outside their houses. It's pretty commonplace on this. It's a really nice avenue called St. George's Avenue here in London, grand houses. And so I was walking and I saw that there were 6 books that were kind of set up in front of someone's house. And again, it was really wet. So 5 of the books were soaked through. And then one of the books, this book, bone dry, as though someone had just put it there. And the house was empty. No one had just put it there. There was no one else who was around. So just thought, okay, well, this is magical. And so that's the first thing I noticed. And then I noticed who's on the cover, and it was Denise. And the edition that I found was designed for Australia. And it's this woman with this fantastically large hair and these bright colors and this like stage makeup, which is very much like of the styling for the late 80s, early 90s. So then I thought, well, this is amazing. Basically, I'm like, here's like a magical drag queen book. I need to get this. I don't know anything that it says, but what I do know is that it's speaking to me. So as I brought it home and started going through it, I just felt everything change. The way that she talks about her own experiences, she's written so many books, and she wrote this, I don't know what, decades ago. And already it's like
94.
yeah, oh, the wholeness of her knowledge is contained in this book. And again, it's full of many exercises and things you can do to get in touch with past lives, to understand yourself. And it's all anchored in that, really, that sense of now and that place of now. That you are who you are now. And these are just different parts of you across space and time that you can get to know better. And as you do that, and as you integrate that, then you step into more of who you are. And what I love the most about this book is the last chapter, where she talks about time and space in the most brilliant description I've ever read. And it really is this sense of, as she says, there is no past and there is no future. She has you imagine a chandelier with all of these, like these kind of the circles of crystals that are going around. And as you move closer to that source of light in the middle, then the crystals appear to get closer and closer and closer until eventually They're all just this one circle, this unified circle, and then you get closer in, and then eventually you're just that point of light. So when we're further away from source, it appears that there are these different versions of us that go around. And if you notice, the chandelier is circular, so at some point the past becomes the future. It's circular time. It's that sense of it's all present here. And then as we get more in touch with that place of source, then whatever we might see as those individual crystals that we might identify within a chandelier doesn't really make sense. We become the point of light that's shining out through all of them, which is really what that past life integration is. It's when you go and you realize that I am this spark of light that exists across all these different places in space and time. And then it's not just this horizontal circle, it's vertical and it's diagonal. And then it's that sense of, as the book was called, the present dreams, that a past life is just a present dream. It's just a dream of who you are from where you are right now. And then there's no attachment to like, I was that person in this life. It's kind of like, well, that misses the point. So the book so brilliantly lays out all of these things, how to connect with your past lives. And then it just convinces you that that's all made up. They're all dreams. So I love any book that kind of presents something and then unravels it. So you get to go on this wonderful journey, and then you get to come back to who you are, maybe closer into that point of light.
Yeah, very well said there. Book number 6, we just referenced it earlier, is Quantum Jumps, An Extraordinary Science of Happiness and Prosperity by Cynthia C. Larson. This one was published in 2013, and I love Cynthia's work. She's just, she's a fount of so much great information, and I love the way her mind works too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She's brilliant. And I found out recently she does spiritual coaching sessions, and I've had a couple of those with her
She
too. And
does.
on an individual level, the experiences that we have had, just wow. When I had a session with her last week, and in it, a butterfly, she was indoors. I was also indoors. She was indoors, and a butterfly just appeared and flew across the screen, flew right in front of her, just out of thin air. And I mean, what a moment. So to be with the person who's written Quantum Jumps, and then to have this magical experience of, we created a butterfly that just showed itself, and the butterfly is such a beautiful symbol of transformation.
So when she does a private session, what is she actually doing? Is she doing a reading for you? Is she helping you maybe answer questions that you might have?
I gather she can do anything. I think she's really just a superhero.
She
So
truly can.
she both presents some information from your lower self, your middle self, and your higher self, almost like a tuning in to you and your energy and what would best serve you in the moment. And then together you sit and interpret those messages. And if there are any questions or inquiries that you want to get to know, she helps you to see below the surface and really appreciate, well, what is it that you really want and need here? And how can we invite the universe, our participatory universe, in to support you? You know, her question, how good can it get? Which I love, because well, for one thing, it's a question we want to know the answer to. And it leaves open this possibility for anything to happen. And that's one of the things I think that is really just a key to having a quantum jump, or that sudden shift in reality, is being open to it. Both there's that wanting to pay attention, to acknowledge, to appreciate it, and then allowing for it to happen. And that's what so much of her work does for me. It shows me that things are possible. And she
Yeah.
writes on Substack. She has I believe it's called Reality Shifter. She has a website that's by the same name. And she chronicles, I've sent her reality shifts that I've experienced, and she chronicles them. And as she shares them, it's like it puts your rational brain at ease. Like, yes, it's possible. It's okay. Like, it's totally fine for, what you would have thought would take an hour. That might take 10 minutes today. Who knows? And so there's that open-hearted warm, well, how good can it get? And there's that playfulness and that fun that comes in as we're all realizing that we are masters of time and space.
When I first landed in America, it was 1999, And within a few months of being there, I was given the opportunity to lead, edit, be in charge of an online spiritual magazine called Planet Lightworker. And I was introduced to Cynthia, and she became a columnist. And she was a columnist for years. And for me, that was the year that I really dived in deep to everything that I'd been looking at for 25 years previously. And to have Cynthia drop into my lap and to be able to, read all of the columns that she wrote was just incredible. That alone was what I came to America to find.
Oh my gosh, I mean, that alone is worth it. I completely agree.
Yeah,
She's just such a gem and so kind
she
and
is.
warm and friendly and approachable and just everything that I wish to be. So, a real role model.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, she is. And she's never changed. In all the years that I've known her, she is the same person. She to me embodies the word grace, and I don't meet many people that I would apply that to, but she's always calm, and she's always reflective, and she's always, exuding grace.
She is, and she's funny. And I think that's one of the things to
She is
appreciate too,
funny
is
too.
that there's no
She is.
heaviness. It's really light and bright and playful.
Yeah. It's, it adds a whole other dimension to the books in your life when you actually get to meet some of the authors and share some time with them, doesn't it?
Oh, it completely does. It's that reminder that these books they are like portals to connect with that author, whether you ever have the chance to meet in person or they show up in your dreams. Truly, this is something that has come through someone and feeling their presence in that very real way. It's just magic.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to a No BS Spiritual Book Club interview, and sharing his 10 best list of most inspirational books today is astrologer, intuitive energy coach, and spiritual guide Patrick Geary. We'll be back with more of Patrick's 10 best spiritual books after this break. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Om Times TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting Om Times Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit sedgbeer.com. Click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's sedgbeer.com, sedgbeer.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene keys is basically the code book of life. In the gene keys, the book is made up of these three levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the Siddhi. And the Siddhis are very exalted words, and it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey, and the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Patrick Geary, book number 7, It's Not Your Money, How to Live Fully from Divine Abundance by Tosha Silver, published in 2019. Tell me about this book.
Oh, I love this book. And this book also came to me through Jenny Blake, through another author on my list. So I also love that when we connect with an author, it's like we're connecting with this resonance of all of these people who know each other. So Jenny and Penny are also good friends, and Penny knows Cynthia. It's amazing that it's not just even one person. We're connecting with this whole expansive network of people who are all on that same vibe. So
Yeah.
I didn't know much about Tosha before I tuned into this book. And for me, money has been such a wonderful guide over the past few years. It's energy, it's source, it comes to us. And it supports us. It offers the resources that we need to create. And we have so many stories about money, about what we have to do to earn it, about how we need to invest it, how we need to hold on to it, how we need to spend it, stories that run back through generations. And then, of course, when we come into relationship with one another, we meet other people's stories about money. And it's something that seems ever present in our world. And there are so many, I'm going to say also negative or denser perceptions around money too, and how money is the root of all evil, or how rich people are terrible, or poor people deserve to be poor. There's all these things that we have that sort of go against this universal law, which is really that we have everything that we need. We are fully supported and we are loved, and money is here to create with us. So I love that Tosha embraces money as a spiritual connector, that she sees money as God. And that's what this book is about. This book is about, it's okay to see money as God, to see money as source. It's really that sense of how willing are you to accept the resources that are there for you to create, which is what you came here to do. So I love that she also, it's like she didn't even intend to write this book as she talks about it. She was like, money? Why am I writing about money? Okay, fine. And she does it. From the outset, she brings herself in that really sort of like the humorous, unwilling participant way of like, okay, well, if this is what I have to do, then I have to do it. And it's just like this divine comedy. And it also goes into so many of these things, like getting to know your inner child. Again, you can look at past lives, you can look at ancestral stories, you look at what it is that you want. Do you feel worthy to create it? And really, at the end of the day, it is about changing yourself into somebody who believes that they're fully resourced.
It's interesting. I've heard people who work with money in a similar way say that we've all got a 6-year-old as our chief financial officer because, by that age, we've imbibed all of our attitudes to money from our parents. And so we need to upgrade that and, look at money in a whole different way. But I loved what you wrote when you said she fills the pages with reassuringly humorous accounts of what happens when we start seeing God in our credit card bills.
She really does. And one of the examples that I love the most from this is she talks about it with someone who is an artist in Berkeley and who had multiple studios and was working long hours and making a substantial amount of money from his, I guess, his wares. And at some point, I believe there was an earthquake or something happened, and one of the studios needed to close. So he ended up needing to downsize, or choosing to downsize to just one. And that meant there was a lot less income coming in, and his family needed to downsize their house and needed to have less space available so that they could have more time available. And it was this sense of everything was in balance, and everyone in the situation was happier with less money than they were when they had more money before. So just that sense of things are allowed to rebalance. And rebalancing doesn't always mean more. Rebalancing means getting what's right for you. So I just feel like she fills this book with so many fantastic examples of what happens when you view money as this, yeah, as this sort of divine intervener. And it's not just, ooh, try and get me, try and chase me, try and have more. It really is that sense of, well, hey, maybe you're actually working too hard. And maybe you don't need all this stuff that you thought you needed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very emotive subject, money. And I think there's a number of books coming out who say similar things. And I think that's really important for us to grasp because, really, if you look at what runs the entire world, it is money in many cases. And it's, people's fear of losing their money, their greed to want more of it, and to accumulate it and not share it. And that's something we really have to tackle.
Yeah, and I think you said it so brilliantly. The fear of money that we see so present around us, the fear of having it, the fear of losing it. And really, when we start to look at money from this place of love, everything shifts. Our whole relationship with money becomes different. So for me, it is that invitation to move from fear and what money looks like when we live in fear, which maybe is a little bit like late stage capitalism, judging from how the world is looking these days. And capitalism is just a story. It's not a
It's all just a
reality.
story.
It's a story that we're telling ourselves about money and how money needs to work. We invented money, and then we invented our relationship with it, and we invented the economy. These aren't things that are inherent in our presence here on the earth. So Tosha's invitation is really, well, what if we had another story? And what if our story was love?
Yeah. Indeed, indeed. When you look at Charles Eisenstein's work with money, and he talks about how, and other people have done it too, talked about how money really began. It all used to be about exchange and appreciation and gratitude. I've got two of something, I only need one, so I'm going to show my appreciation of you by giving you one. And people were exchanging things. And later on, you start getting salt, and then you get paid in salt, and then you get coins with people's heads on. And the minute somebody got the idea of usury, giving you money and then you've got to give me that and 10% back interest, that's when it all started getting corrupted.
Oh, wow. What an interesting appreciation. And what a moment. And I guess that is maybe that disconnection from source, where it's that sense, well, I can't part with this and you need to pay me for this. And this isn't unconditional. And just that fear stepping in, almost that hoarding, which is really what we see, being a billionaire in today's world. How are you going to spend $1 billion? This is hoarding. You don't need $1 billion.
No. Anyway, we better move on. We could talk about for a whole show about money, but book number 8, The Emotion Code by Dr. Bradley Nelson, published in 2007. I think I interviewed him last year. Fascinating book.
Oh, yeah. It's brilliant. The way that it talks about emotions as energy and how they sit within our system. And it's really a deeply spiritual tome. He's also a very spiritual man, and he includes stories in it, including one story that's about a dream sequence one of his clients had with God, wondering, why do we have fear, and why is fear present in our bodies, and appreciating that fear allows for us to connect with one another, that fear allows for us to get to know ourselves better, and that it gives us the experience of helping other people and ourselves to release and to let go. And that's what this book is ultimately about. It is about releasing and letting go of emotions through respect. And what I really like about it is, it feels like there's been this huge evolution in terms of how we can release and what we can let go of and what we can forget. And this book for me was a big step up, because it's not, you need to go in and feel your emotions. You need to go back to that memory and identify what the emotion is and sit with it and be in it. It's much more a sense of, well, this is energy that's here. It's in your body. It's in your field, and you're feeling uncomfortable in your shoulder. Maybe there's a link. So maybe we can ask your shoulder, is it holding on to something from the past? And if it is, then using magnets, we can just do 3 simple swipes, over the governing meridian. So one of those energy rivers that runs through our body, and we can just let it go. And if it needs more to be known, then it will also let us. So it's a very simple protocol of just that sense of, all right, well, my shoulder hurts. It's enough for me to know that I'm in discomfort. And then when I know that I'm in discomfort, I can identify what it is that's perhaps the cause or contributing to that discomfort, and then I can release it. I don't need to spend hours or years of therapy going into the experience and reliving it. I can just let it go. And that to me is just so brilliant.
Yeah. And he recently brought out the belief code as well. I mean, he's got the body code too, but the belief code came, I think, only about 6 months ago or so. I don't know whether he's actually published the book yet, but I know his practitioners have been working with that, because it was, done with me. I had a session with somebody, and that's very powerful. I mean, our beliefs.
Oh, it's so cool. And similarly, I've had some experience with it. My friend Robin Friedman runs an emotion code clearing circle that uses the emotion code, the body code, and the belief code. So it's so cool. And the way that he looks at the roots and the branches, and identifying where the beliefs are and where they sit in these different parts of your energy. So it's also a great way to get to know, especially as you go more in depth, to get to know your body and to get to know your energy, your mind, and how things are structured. So it's not just that you have this very accessible protocol to just release things. It does also impart a tremendous amount of knowledge about how you work.
Yeah. So book number 9. I mentioned earlier that there is a synchronicity story here around this book. Let's talk about the book first, and then we'll talk about the synchronicity. The book is A Course in Mastering Alchemy, Tools to Shift, Transform and Ascend by Jim Self and Roxanne Burnett, published in 2018. How did you come across this book?
Oh my gosh. So I was listening to an interview with Jim Self and Pam Gregory, wonderful astrologer. And I like Pam. I can't say that I regularly tune into her work. It was just one of those things that just found me. And I listened to the interview, and the way that he was speaking, it was gentle and it was soft, and it was also so clear and so brilliant. So I listened to the interview, and I remember that he had talked about a program that he offered, or some courses he offered on his site. And weeks later, I still felt him echoing in my head. And I thought, all right, I need to go back and what is the name of that? What is it that he was talking about? Then I went onto the website and I found online courses. And I currently am giving myself a hiatus from online courses, because I love to buy them and then not finish them. So I thought, all right, well, I really want to get to know this. I'm not sure I want to do a course right now. And then this book emerged. And the book is a course. And I was like, well, this I can definitely do. It's a book. It's something physical. I know that it's going to speak with me and it's going to work with me, and it's designed as a course. So I love a book as a course, because again, it doesn't have this, I need to show up every week and do it in this particular way. It's much sort of, for me, that more gentle invitation of, I might read 3 chapters in a day, and then I might not read anything for 2 months because it might take me that long. to integrate whatever it is that's shown up. So I got the book, and as soon as I started reading it, it was just like this crystal clear light just shining on my brain. Just this real amazing sense of, wow, both this overarching sense of what's happening in the world all around us and what's our experience with fear, and also what's happening in our own individual systems. And as we're all moving into a world where fear isn't present, what does that mean for us as creator beings? So ultimately, it is about stepping into your own creator self, your I am presence. And right now, that also means letting go. And so this to me was also another step up from the emotion code, which is that sense of, well, I don't even need to identify what that emotion is. All I need to know is that it's not mine. It's not about me. That has nothing to do with me.
Mm.
That's something someone else told me, or that's something someone else was feeling, and I just happened to be around for it. So it's almost like with the emotion code, I might say it's like it would be like there would be a suitcase, and I would need to pick up the suitcase and say, oh, well, that's a red shirt. I don't need a red shirt. This is just like, I can just look at the suitcase and just say, wait a second, that's not my suitcase. I don't need that suitcase. So it's just like this, it's ushered in this period of mass forgetting for me, of just these whole chunks falling away. And as they do, the creativity comes online. There's much more comfort with feeling the power of, oh, wow, I can create my experience. How would I like to feel today? Like when I'm no longer having emotions that are showing up in my system that will pull my attention, I have so much more power to decide, well, today I'd like to feel relaxed. And that's possible. Before, that didn't feel so accessible.
I have to, in the interests of transparency, share that I know Jim Self and Roxanne very, very well. I worked very closely with them for 3 years. And Jim is, without doubt, in my experience, one of the most masterful teachers I've ever met. And I was really pleased to see this book on your list because I had, a little hand in some of what they've done. I'm not taking credit for it, but I helped them find a publisher, etc. You and I had a conversation, and I told you, wow, I'm really pleased to see this book because, this is my experience of Jim, and it truly is one of the best courses I've ever come across. Absolutely. And you were very enamored of the book. And then last week, I got an email from Roxanne Burnett saying, I'm looking for a good astrologer. Can you recommend one? And I said, I know just the person. So I put the two of you together. And it's almost as if, in the conversation you and I had, you were so impressed with the work that you conjured up that experience, with Roxanne.
Oh, absolutely. I totally manifested that in the best possible way. And even more synchronously, when I saw that message from you, I was co-facilitating a retreat in Bordeaux. And just the day before, we had done a lot of work on feeling safe to be seen and feeling safe to be that sort of the lighthouse or the church tower that people would see from miles and miles away to come to. So as soon as I really felt that deep energetic shift in me thinking, all right, it's okay. It's okay for me to be seen. It's okay for me to be this beacon that other people want to come towards. Immediately I see this message and I just thought, wow, like how cool is that to have that reflected at such a monumental time for me.
Yeah. And, and for me to have been part of that is also, a wonderful little miracle because you never know. We do this all the time. We recommend people, we recommend things, we act as an intermediary, a bridge or whatever. But then to find out, what that actually meant to the people involved is just such a gift.
It really is. And you're such a brilliant connector. I mean, it's exactly what you're doing. It's like what you're put here to do. So you're doing it so well.
I know. People call me the cosmic switchboard. Yeah, but let's move on to book number 10. This is Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, published in 1943. And I probably mangled the pronunciation there, but hey, I'm English, we do that. Tell me about this book and what it means to you.
Ah, this book means so much to me. I mean, for one thing, as an astrologer, the awareness of the stars and the presence of the stars in our lives. And also in my personal life, I have two kids. They are now 4 and 5. And when my daughter was 3 months old, kind of out of nowhere, I just woke up one morning and I thought, I think I need to speak French with her. It wasn't, it was never my intention when she was born. And I speak French. I can't say that I speak perfect French, but I speak good French. I speak fluently, and I speak with a good accent, with a French accent. So it's given me this French childhood that I never had. Is it's such a wonderful way to learn, going through these little magazines and these little books and singing the little French songs. Of course, when we moved here in London, we moved to a new neighborhood and we're now surrounded by French people. My kids immediately got to go to a bilingual nursery. So I just have been exploring and loving this language from this playful perspective of young people. And what's the most famous French children's book? Well, it's Le Petit Prince. So when I had the chance to get it, we were in Paris and they had a big setup for it. I think they were celebrating an important anniversary. And I thought, well, I need to get a bunch of these Petit Prince things. I got a little book, and my daughter was still a little young at the time to start reading it. But we could start, I got a version for babies that had some sound buttons that you could push. And then I got the bigger version for kids that are a little bit bigger. And now I'm going through with her the full version. And so it's even that sense of my own evolution and my own getting to know myself and this book and this view of the universe through the beautiful eyes of the French culture. And what I love most is it starts off with the beginning with this real sense of children know best. That, adults are really funny creatures. And the little prince goes to see all of these adults on these little miniature planets who are pretending to be kings and pretending to be business people, just counting the stars and recounting them. And he looks at them and he's kind and he's gentle. And he also has this piercing wisdom. And he just presents so clearly how silly we all are, or how silly we all become when we become adults, and how we can disconnect from our creative selves. And we can forget that essence of who we really are that exists in the stars. And it has that kind of beautiful, bittersweet, wistful quality, that sense of time passing and almost the beauty, the eternal beauty that exists in a moment if we only allow ourselves to perceive it. And it has that almost that it's ephemeral. It feels like when you read it, every experience just sort of washes through you. And even my daughter, as she read it, something that she found sad. And so I also gave her a chance to, it's the one where he leaves his rose. He has this beautiful rose on his planet that he's been looking after. And she was just in floods of tears, like, oh, but he's left the rose. How will the rose be okay? So even with her, sat down and we drew an alternate ending where the rose gets taken care of and where he brings it along with him. That kind of different choices of what can happen. So I love both that it opens things up and that she's responded directly to this book. Almost in that sense of, well, maybe you don't need to be sad about this. Maybe it's just big people who get sad about this, but she's a little person. She hasn't disconnected from her creativity. She's very much here. She's very present. There's no sadness for her. So I even love that she's given herself permission to just create a new version of it, which I feel like is exactly what this author would want.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever got any clues about why you wanted to start talking French? Does she have, French heritage perhaps, or past life, or?
Well, I can tell you that a few months after I started speaking French with her, I have a very talented tarot reader. I mean, probably more than tarot reader, oracle. We'll call her an oracle. She's in Vienna, a friend introduced me to. And I set up a session with her. And she told me, and my daughter was on the bed with me when I was doing the session. And she told me, sort of apropos of nothing, but apropos of everything, um, you might want to take your daughter to the south of France 3 times before she, is 6 months old. And it might be really nice if you can play her some French songs or just have some French music around. She really is going to get a lot of wisdom from hearing the French language, and it's going to be very deeply soothing to her. And funnily enough, of course, I was already speaking French with her. She had already been to the south of France twice, and I was going again. My husband was away, so I was going again with some friends and her the next week. So we're about to get ready for our third trip abroad. I understand there's a lot of it's kind of connected to the Cathar energy, which is very much
Oh,
that
yes. Yes.
beautiful, clear,
Yes.
spiritual energy, and the singing and the traveling and the performing. These are also imprints that I can see in her and with her. So yeah, it was just, for me, it was a very affirming message. Just said like, oh, okay, well, how nice is it that I was listening to this? And maybe even that more affirming, well, maybe this is why she picked me. It's like, it is kind of funny. I grew up in Virginia. Like, I didn't learn a foreign language until, I was 10, 11. I didn't speak any French till I was 14. Why do I speak French without an American accent? I don't know. So that's the biggest thing for me was, it's interesting, it's the sound. It was, well, I may not know all of the verbs or all the words. I do know that I can sound like a French person. And so her ear, when she picks up on it, she's going to sound like a French person too. And so it really was about that sound and that resonance. And maybe that's too why I so enjoy reading that book in French, because you get the message when it comes across in English, but it doesn't sound the same.
That is going to be a delightful mystery that's going to unfold as she grows older. Wow.
Yeah, it will be. And for me too. That's part of the joy of having kids, is we
You
get
do.
to
Yeah.
experience it unfolding
Yeah.
together.
It's
And
like watch this space. We want to know more.
yeah, and she'll probably be taking me around France.
Very likely. Very likely. Well, that is your 10 best books. Now, let's talk a little bit about you. You made this incredible career change. From a lawyer, you were 15 years a lawyer. You started at Wall Street, you ended at the United Nations, and then you surprised yourself. What was it that triggered that decision? I am going to change everything.
Oh, that is a wonderful question, and I have no idea. It just happened. It was, maybe what it was is, for me, that recognition of, it's not this. Just my whole body speaking to me. I remember it was in 2017, and I understand that many people have talked about 2017 as like a key turning point. It's right around the spring equinox. I think Jim Self has even talked about that as a time when like new waves of light were hitting the earth. So there was just something deep within me that knew at that point, it's not this. What I'm doing now, this isn't it. In my body, I remember I broke my wrist when I was skiing, and it was a nothing fall at the end of the day. It was just like tipping over, and somehow I broke my wrist. Like, this is really strange. I broke my wrist. I had a headache for 3 months. I was having all kinds of gastric things happening in my body. My work situation was I was holding so much stress and so much resistance. And then I unexpectedly took the summer off on medical leave. I'd never done something like that before. Being the good Scorpio that I am, I planned it in advance. I thought, well, at the end of June, I'm going to go into the doctor, and I'm going to go and just, take 2 weeks to just rest and like let this kind of work its way out. I mean, meanwhile, I'm having dreams where I'm waking up choking in the middle of the night. So it was a pretty intense time. And I went into the doctor and just burst into floods of tears. And I didn't take 2 weeks off. I took 2 months off. And it was really after a month of first 2 weeks of not sleeping and then 2 weeks of solidly sleeping. And then everything changed. It was just the space. It was just once I gave myself the space for things to be different, for things to open up, everything completely changed. So it's not so much that there was one light bulb moment or one like, this is what I'm going to be doing. Even with astrology, that over that time, I both, came back to astrology and appreciated how beautiful it is and how it's real. It's a genuine phenomenon. I always think it's funny when people say, do you believe in astrology? It's like, well, do you believe in French? I mean, it's a thing. You don't have to speak it. You don't ever have to go to France. Your life can be complete without it. So you don't need to be invested in astrology. Also, it's a thing. So it was both that dawning realization of, wow, well, this is a thing. And as soon as you're like, oh, well, astrology is a thing, then it's like, well, wait a second. All of that stuff that I learned about how it's not real, well, that can't be right. And that's what started that deconstructing process that Seth stepped in to help me with that kind of reconstructing. It was like that moment of, all that stuff that I learned, nope, it's not that. So just planting that seed and allowing for it to grow. So it really was just the space and the opening that allowed me to be.
So, in retrospect, when you look back over that, I mean, you do your cosmic updates, you run regular workshops and retreats, you are an intuitive healer, you are a teacher, spiritual guide. When you look back, can you see the clues in your life and your personality to all of that? Were they evident?
Yeah, I absolutely can. I mean, even with law, that's one of the funniest things is it's always like I appreciate from the outside, it probably looks like a huge transition. And then when I think about the law that I was practicing as international law, I was looking at these huge overarching statements, these universal human rights, which are these beautiful statements. Like we all have the right to freedom of belief. We get to believe whatever we want. We get to worship whatever we want. We have the right to food. We have the right to water. Just these, the right to express ourselves. These wonderful rights that we recognize in international law for all of us. And what my job was to look at those rights specifically for children and then to translate those into very real on the ground situations that specifically for me, I was looking at businesses or people who are being impacted by businesses, which is all of us, are facing. So I'm taking these universal principles and then taking them down through all these different layers. So you take a universal principle and then you have, you'll have like a regional body. So you might have like the EU. And then within the EU, you would have France and you'd have French law. And then within French law, you might be in Paris. And then you'd be looking at, well, what's the law in Paris? And then you might be at a school in Paris. And then, okay, well, you're at a school in Paris. You have all these different layers of law that are applying. And you're looking for how do I still see that universal principle from all the way down here on the ground where I am? And when I connect with that universal principle, how do I move forward? And that's exactly what I do in my work now. I look at these universal principles, the laws of the universe, how everything works, and I talk to people about their own individual situations, what's showing up for them in their lives, and then we look up to that universal law that we know is true, and then we connect with it, and we draw it in, and then we move forward from that. In that sense of, well, I'm following that law. I'm not following whatever this belief I have is that it was installed or that I accepted at some point along the way. So it's the same thing. It's just doing it in a totally different way.
Well, unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but I have one more question for you. If you were a book, what adjectives would appear on the cover to surprise you? To describe you, sorry, not surprise you, to describe you as a book.
Well, I think let's just go with surprising. I think you've already given it a voice. What better word to put on the cover of a book than surprising,
Surprise.
It's just so perfect. And even that statement that, you read, you don't judge a book by its cover. That also says something to me, that sense of, well, look, there's going to be so much more within and be open to surprise. Even as Cynthia says that surprise is one of the best ways that we learn. So I love it. I think you've already answered it for me. It's got to be surprising.
Patrick Geary, thank you for adding your 10 best list of spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. We really appreciate your contribution.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate your contribution. It truly is a service to the world and just so joyful.
It is fun, isn't it?
It sure
So
is.
you can learn more about Patrick Geary's weekly cosmic updates, his workshops, retreats, study groups, and more at his website, which, interestingly, is not his name. It is truthtakestime.com. I love that. Really love that. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Patrick Geary.